Hello everyone and welcome back to the Overseers. I'm Proelios, joined as usual by my co-host Nightwing, and in this episode we'll be doing a team preview of the Philadelphia Fusion going into Season 5 of the Overwatch League. As usual, we'll be kicking things off with the tank players for this team, and it's just one in this case, Nightwing, which is Fury. And according to me, Fury is a top tier off tank. He has been consistently competitive in the league, and there's really no reason for that to change now. What are your thoughts on him, Nightwing?
I think in terms of pure diva mechanics, he is the best world in the best diva in the world in that sense to me. Even better than Void in just the pure ability of having insane eats, positioning himself well for peels and getting confirming kills. I think in that sense he's up there with insane players like Void. But there have been times where his coordination with the team has been off. That said, he is absolutely still a top tier off tank, and I hope that'll continue into Overwatch 2. I can really see him picking up the ball quite well because he does have really good mechanics and just a very good feel for the game. He's obviously a veteran of the scene, and I think he'll do quite well as a solo tank. But again, solo tanking is not really something I would wish upon any tank player in Overwatch 2, just because I think everything is really going to be in flux. So it's probably just a better bet to get another tank for any roster, just in case one tank player struggles to adapt to Overwatch 2 and struggles to adapt to the main tank heroes, or a main tank player struggles to adapt to the off tank heroes. So in that sense, I think Fury is in for a little bit of a rough time. That said, I think if there's any players that I would trust with solo tanking, Fury is probably up there with some of the few that I would trust.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that Fury was not only great on Diva last year, but he also had good showings on Zarya and Sigma, which he has proven to be quite consistent on as well. And just talking about his flexibility a little bit, he has played a fair bit of Orisa in the past, especially when in season 2 we got the very first double shield brawl meta. Fury was on Orisa at that time with Gesture on the Sigma, and Fury played quite well at that time. He has also showcased some ball gameplay here and there, so he does have the flexibility to play some main tank heroes as well. So, as a solo tank for this team, at least at this point, I think he's in a decent position to fill the gaps in his tank pool because there's not a lot that he needs to really adapt to, considering that he already has amazing mechanics. And besides, off tank heroes are seemingly much better than main tank heroes, at least in the Overwatch 2 alpha, so that could work to his benefit. And just knowing how slow the Overwatch team is with making all of these changes, I don't think that's going to change very fast. So, with all of this information, I think Fury is probably going to be a top 10 tank going into this season of the league. And I'm super excited to see him because he's always proven to be a threat. And like I said before, there's no reason for that to change now. Um, on that note, I think let's move on to the damage line for the Fusion, starting off with the veteran player Carpe. Nightwing, I'll let you go first on this. Do you think Carpe is still the solid hit scan player that we've known from seasons past?
I think this question comes up again every single season. I think people are, foaming at the mouth for someone to say Carpe is washed or that he's not washed, and then they'll jump on the contrary opinion. I think he's perfectly serviceable still. I think he'll adapt well into the new game. I think he has a good understanding of the game. Uh, he was not the most flexible player in Overwatch 1. He did show flexibility here and there. I think that may translate to him not getting a lot of new hero playtime if new heroes turn out to be kind of busted. In Overwatch 2, I think you might leave that up to the rookie players. But in terms of just solid hit scan ability, in terms of even his tracer play, I think he's still quite solid. And, he'll he'll do what Carpe does in general. I don't think he's going to be a world beater by any means. I think the APAC region is still very, very competitive, especially in DPS play. And basically every category in general, but especially in DPS and his scan play. So in that sense, I think Carpe still has his work cut out for him in terms of competing with established players in the field as well as new rookies coming in, including players that are on his own team. For example, MN3. Do you want to give me the rundown on MN3, or do you want to talk a bit more about Carpe first, Troilus?
So, like, just to quickly add to your thoughts on Carpe, because I'm pretty much on the same page as you. I think Carpe is still quite solid, except that he's just lost his, that god status in my mind because of how competitive the hit scan landscape currently is. But I still trust him to have great aim and click heads because he's Carpe. But I think he'll need to be consistent to regain like mine and in general the fan bases believe that he's still a top tier hit scan player. And like you said, I'm still worried about his flexibility because he's still formidable on those pure aim heroes, but struggles with more cooldown based picks like Sombra and Reaper. So, like, since Overwatch 2 will bring in even more heroes with, the exception of Sojourn, who seems right up his alley, I think he's going to need to have to work on, like, understanding the cooldown cycles of different heroes a little bit better. But I'm still optimistic about him. And just to add to the hit scan prowess of this team, they've got MN3, who is a Korean player coming in from T1. And he also has really good mechanical skill and seems like a very confident player just based off his playstyle. Because as far as I've seen, he's not one to play safe. He will go in and get things done because that's just how accurate his shots are. He is one of the more aggressive hit scan players that you will see positioning wise. He's not someone who will feed, but if he knows that he's going to win a duel or he's going to get a pick, he's just going to go out there, not worry about being behind the tanks, and he's going to get a pick. That's just how he is. He has, impressed me greatly on Cass and Hanzo. And he plays very traditional Hitscan heroes plus Sombra plus Hanzo and has proven to be a clutch player as well. So I think he's close to that god tier of Hitscan players, but not quite there yet. But I honestly have more faith than on him than on Carpe at this point. It might be a hot take, but I'm interested to know your thoughts on this, Nightwing.
I think the fact of the matter is that while rookie prospects are, really entertaining, and I think if he gets really lucky, he might just turn out to be like almost a shy level talent. That because his individual ability does look quite good. That said, in terms of just looking at the results that he's produced and extrapolating from that about like how well he works with the rest of his team, he hasn't really achieved anything exceptional in contenders, especially in this past year. There are players that have more brand value than him in terms of players that have been signed from Korea contenders. I think there's definitely some players that have just a bit more firepower in them. But that said, I think MN3, maybe if he's given a good system to work around and work in, he might be able to flourish a lot more than expected. I think Carpe might still slightly have an edge over him, but I think it really depends. I think it's quite hard to say because I don't know what Carpe's current ability will be, and I certainly don't know what MN3's current ability would be going into Overwatch 2 and how they work into the currently reported sort of quote unquote super dive sort of meta, how each of them kind of fare in the sniper matchup. So that's something I think that, remains to be seen. But I think if nothing else, he's at least a source of motivation for Carpe to get his sort of ducks in a row and start popping off again, if nothing else.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think I might be a bit biased towards MN3 just because I've seen so much of his footage just to prepare for analyzing all of these teams. But yeah, I think let's just bench the discussion about the hit scans and talk about Zest, who was MN3's DPS partner in crime from T1. And he is a projectile player who also plays some Tracer. And as far as I know, he has some clutch potential and flexibility. And even though he's not as good as MN3, I think he can be a stable presence for the Fusion, and like will probably at worst be league average. Like I think average is where I do see him like ending up, just because I don't think he's exceptional, but he's played consistently well, at least um, as far as I've seen. So I'm hopeful for him, and I think, especially considering the Fusion's coaching staff, which we will come to soon, Zest will fit in with this team in some way or the other. What are your thoughts on him, Nightwing?
So I think the thing with Zest is that he was one of the only players from that very questionable OZ gaming roster from last year, who we kept talking about in last year's team previews, that did not get picked up last year because he was underage. And this year he played for T1, who, again, just like I said with MN3, they didn't do exceptionally well. They came in around third and fourth place, which is all right, but there's definitely some players that perform better than them, and that shows in the contenders' results, right? I think he has a serviceable tracer. He has, decent projectile gameplay, but I am not really super excited to see him. I think if he's going to show his stuff, it'll have to be on the league stage for me to really believe that this is a great signing uh, for the Philly Fusion. Because if you look at heroes like the May, or even if you're running the Echo comp where the majority of the damage is coming from the Echo, something like that, I think, do I have my entire faith in Zest to be able to sort of carry the roster and make full use of any resources afforded to him? I'm not so sure. And I think that's really where the stinker is for me, uh, for Zest. I think if he's good, then he could be quite good, but it just has to be proven on the league stage for me.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, and I think a lot of these players who haven't had a chance to showcase those pop-off moments in contenders, it's a bit hard to say how good they will be in the league, especially considering it's going to be a brand new game. So, just I think let's move on to the support line and see if we can find some more details there. Starting off with Fixer, who is a main support coming in from Uprising Academy, and he seems to be like a good player. I mean, I don't really know any details about his gameplay, unfortunately, but I think he's going to be a league average main support. As far as I've seen, he's got good awareness and like the ability to peel well for his other support. Um, I think overall he should be a serviceable pickup, but I don't think he's going to be exceptional. One thing I did notice about him, even though I don't know much about his playstyle, I do know that he's someone who's constantly on the lookout for flankers. So he's someone who will constantly be looking over his shoulder, like spy checking for sombras, or just spamming corners uh, to deny the enemy DPS space. So I think just like he's a high APM player, and that might benefit him going into Overwatch too. Have you watched his gameplay a lot, and like have you been able to pinpoint what makes him click Nightwing?
So instead of looking at like Fixa intentionally, I was just looking at Uprising Academy VODs in general, because they've had a few players that have been picked up. Finale, Victoria, Itzal, and Fixa himself. And I've got to say, he didn't like make any major mistakes. I think he did like show, like you said, that high APM, and that's why a lot of the kill credits went to him. He was very active throughout the entire sort of games that I saw, much more than like the average contender support. Uh, but that said, I don't think he's going to be quite up there with like the Chorongs of the world in terms of rookie main support talent. I think it really remains to be seen where exactly he's at. I think, uh, considering the competitiveness of the APAC region, he might just be almost a weak link of sorts compared to some of the other main supports that you've got, uh, especially obviously against players like Super Rich and Lee Chae-gon from the Hangzhou Spark and Shanghai Dragons, respectively. I think those are matches where you might just see sort of a main support diff, where I might see Fixer not doing that well. Uh, that said, he's a good rookie prospect. He might just do quite well going into this new game. That said, I think he will struggle to really reach that same pedigree that comes with veteran experience as a player established in the Overwatch League. But hopefully he proves me wrong. I mean, that would be great because I always love seeing great new main support talent because it's a little bit rare compared to these like cracked, Red Bull drinking, caffeined out like DPS talent. I think main support talent is a lot more subtle. So if Vixa's got it, then great for him, and it would be great to watch as a spectator, obviously.
Yep, and just moving on to the flex support for this team, Aim God, who is coming in from Team CC this year. Uh, so Aim God has already been in the league before with the Boston Uprising and the Washington Justice, and honestly, I don't think he's very good. I feel like he's towards the bottom of the league in terms of skill level, and like I honestly cannot compare him to Alarm, and I'm really not trying to. Uh, but still, I just don't think he's Overwatch League caliber right now. And to make a significant impact in the league, he would really need to step up his game. Um, I don't think he's got any kind of signature hero. I don't think he's like someone who can match most other flex supports in the league. Like I'm honestly more confident about like I don't know. I'm more confident about creative, or more confident about Bebe than I'm confident about Aim God, and that's saying something. So yeah, honestly, those are just my unbiased thoughts on Aim God, and I'm gonna let you pitch in Nightwing.
I feel like Aim God does not have it in him to work well within a system. I don't think I've seen exceptional team play because of him. I don't think he worked very well with the Washington Justice when he played for them. I think the only times he excelled were when he just sort of flanked us Zen and tried to get a few headshots in. But that's because the Washington Justice were playing such a chaotic, Hog Zarya comp that it worked for a little bit in the playoffs. And before that, he was just chain feeding, just like the rest of the team. And even looking at his recent performances, if you think he's up for redemption, he did do okay, I guess, acceptable for Team CC. But Team CC was on a crazy high right before he even was part of the roster. They were pretty much like consistently first or second before Aim God joined, and then after that they dropped to third and then fifth place, which out of 8 teams is just not a very good look, especially for the team with as much talent and budget as Team CC. So I think it's really saying something that Aim God is sort of reducing the caliber of that team almost. I think that may just translate onto the Philadelphia Fusion. I would certainly hope not. I think the rest of the caliber of the players is higher than Aim Gods, and I hope that isn't dragged down. But I think it seems exceptionally likely, just because the flex support talent on every other team seems incredibly strong, and the Aim God, I don't think is of that same caliber.
Yep, and I think to round things off, let's go over the coaching staff as well. Uh, Starting off with two coaches who are coming in from T1 along with MN3 and Zest, which are head coach Jin or J1N. I don't know how it's pronounced. I'm just gonna say Jin for now. And Chara. Now, Jin is like they're both Korean, by the way, and Jin is like Jin has coached T1 like before as well as the Guangzhou Charge during season 3, which was arguably their best season. And just because of that, he seems like a competent coach. So I think he'll pump some life into this team. Like considering that he's already worked with MN3 and Zest, I think he considers like he's probably comfortable working with them, which is why he's brought them in along with him. And he's also with Chara, whom he's worked with while they were with the Guangzhou Charge. And Chara seemed like a pretty smart player while he was with the Charge, so should be quite effective with especially a fully Korean team. But also three members with whom he's worked with before. So there's a good bit of synergy in there, and I think even though like the team might be a little bit lackluster on the player front, the coaching staff has a potential to elevate them a little bit, although not to a very high level. Um, they've also got Sungmin, who is another Korean coach coming in from Motu Blast, which won the latest season of Contenders. And he's also got experience with Runaway and Team BM. And I'm not sure how good he is, but he has a decent track record in Contenders and is again with a fully Korean roster. So should at least be comfortable communicating with the players and the other coaches. So all in all, I think the coaching line is pretty good. Uh, if the players are serviceable, I think they can have a significant impact and make their team uh, like push for some playoff runs. But it all depends on what the meta is and what Overwatch 2, more importantly, looks like in terms of like just how impactful each role is going to be when the season begins. So we'll talk a bit more about that towards the end. But Nightwing, I think I'll let you talk about the coaches.
I have a bit of a different perspective on this. I don't think this coaching staff is good at all, honestly. I think basically the head coach has not really won anything in the past, whatever they've worked in Overwatch. They've only had some success in that one Genji meta when they worked for the Guangzhou Charge. And apart from that, it's just a bunch of mediocre, like mid-table finishes the entire way around. And Chara doesn't have much going for him as a coach either. He wasn't an exceptional player in the Overwatch League by any means. I think he was just as mid-table as his coaching results seems to suggest. Honestly, the closest person to success seems to be Sungmin, who coached O2 Blast as an assistant coach, I believe. And before that, he coached Team BM, who also did not do exceptionally well. Mostly just mid-table finishes with a few firsts in between. So I think it's pretty much a downgrade even from coaches like 9K, coaches like KDG, even like Hayes or something along those lines. I think this may just be like the worst coaching staff the Philly Fusion might have had so far, if I'm being perfectly honest. Just because they don't have those credentials or that pedigree or even experience with very good players like behind them. And that makes me worry for this team because I don't think players like Zest will be able to prosper without really solid coaching behind them. And because it's rookie talent, you have to teach them how to play on the Overwatch League stage. It's not really the same thing as Tier 2, right? I think this may be kind of a final nail in the coffin for any Philadelphia Fusion fans. If you just look at the coaching staff, they don't have a lot of laurels behind them. If they're going to, do really well, I think it will be a real shocker for me first of all, before anyone else, because I think it's a major step down in terms of coaching. I think 9K was much stronger. I think KDG had incredible scouting potential. His was all right. That said, yeah, it's just kind of a question mark for me. I think I will be super surprised if the coaching does turn out to be exceptional, especially going into Overwatch 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you do make a fair point about them being sort of um, unproven coaches at the Overwatch League level, but I think in general, considering how their teams have played down in Contenders, it gives me a little bit more optimism than it gives you. I also think being a fully Korean team on the player as well as the coaching front is a big plus because it's a first for the Fusion. It eliminates any kind of like it eliminates any kind of issues that can happen with miscommunication, and miscommunication can just cause a ton of problems. So there's no language barrier right now. There are players as well as coaches with synergy between them, and they've had a fair amount of time to kind of like scrim together and get comfortable with each other. All in all, I feel like I think Fury is probably the best part of this team, just considering how flexible he is, how mechanically skilled he is, and like just the sheer amount of experience that he has. Uh, the DPS line is pretty good. I think it could be better with like probably one more star player. Uh, the support line is just super underwhelming to me. So I don't think this team is going to be anywhere like near the top half. Honestly, I think they will struggle to make it to the playoffs. They might even get there, but I don't think they're going to make any deep runs. Do you agree with that, Nightwing?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm looking at the APAC region, the only teams I would put below the Philly Fusion are probably the Guangzhou Charge and the LA Valiant, maybe. I think every other team is fairly stronger than the Philly Fusion at the moment. I think Hangzhou, while they do have that Chinese Korean dichotomy that they might have to work with and struggle with, like they did last year, they have more players to fill in gaps in hero pools. They don't have a player solo tanking. They have uh, probably a stronger, backline as well. I think I would trust Ione more than I would trust Aim God, and I would probably trust Super Rich more than I would trust Fixer as well. Um, I think the roster is just limited for the Philly Fusion. I don't really trust the coaching staff. There's a lot that can go wrong here, despite it being fully Korean. I think they really need to add some much stronger pieces, or they'll be relegated to at best like a fourth place finish, unless uh, like even in the best case scenario, I don't see them getting a leg up on anyone except the Seoul Dynasty, because I think the Chengdu Hunters and the Shanghai Dragons will still be punching down hard on them. I think it'll be really hard for the Philly Fusion to find success in the APAC region this year.
Yep, and I think on that note we can end this episode. We appreciate anyone who's been listening so far, and we will see you in our next team preview, which will be about the Vancouver Titans. Bye bye.